Hi, this is Paolo. Today I'm gonna rumble about the evolution of pu'er, possibly the evolution of your taste, the factory taste, Menkai factory taste, Sheng and Shou pu'er, storage, modern gushu production, and factory and past factory productions, and different styles of production and how it was. I say rumbling because the topic is quite sweeping. You could think of it as a history of where pu'er tastes have gone in the last 20 years. But it's also going to be very connected with your own taste experience because we'll go through it, but my taste certainly changed quite a lot in the first 5 years I drank tea, and I expect that's true for you as well. So as a companion to this, I am brewing this cake. This cake was introduced to me as 99 Qimbing. It does look like 7542, at least from the front. The back is a bit different. This is an absolute piece of art, and if the material looks very good, the storage of this has been excellent. So this I've seen in person where it's been stored. It was a very big urn with a bunch of these cakes naked in Yilan. So this is in northwestern Taiwan, quite humid and also relatively warm. But the gentleman that keeps this, his name is Daniel. He has sold us quite a lot of teas that we used to sell on Puerh UK at the beginning, particularly from Chen YuanHao. And the storage has always been great. So it's hot and dry. And so his flat is about like 12 or 14 floors, something like that. And normally he keeps cakes in a plastic bag like this, but these were all kept in a herb, so they are a little bit more wet than his usual normal dry storage, but it feels really clean. This cake has been, you will see why I'm brewing specifically this cake to talk about this topic. So let me wash it. Because this cake has been aged for a while, I'm not gonna flash dip it, but I'm gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna wait about this amount of time. I pre-boil my water to 100 degrees. Um, 99 Qimbing, I believe he said he bought this around the year 2000 to the beginning of 2000s. And so it should be from the very late 90s, possibly as old as 95, but probably more like 98, 99. And this came off really well. Not just clean, but I could steep this for even a bit longer, but since we're talking. Here's the liquor. Nice, intense, sweet aroma. But as I wait for this to cool down, I just made this series called Brew Pu'er Like a Pro, which you probably have seen, and in it I brew 5 different ages of pu'er, and in the middle one, semi-aged, it's the only one that I actually couldn't find a cake I really loved. I brewed 2 cakes, a 2001 Yichang, which is a pretty famous cake, and a 2003 Hong Kong Henry. And actually, what I get the most excited about is the fact that this Hong Kong Henry tastes like it will age into something like this, or even into the 88 Qimbing, which again is another 7542. In this case, particularly from Menkai Factory. So that's very interesting because I used to drink a lot of that kind of aged tea. So we define that age of tea as, well, basically this color. So it's not brown yet, but it's definitely not orange either. Wow. Sweet and clean. which is very remarkable on a cake like this. Normally, factory cakes of this age, if they've not been aged a lot, they taste quite a bit more harsh than this, but this is not harsh at all. But it's definitely underbrewed, so I'm gonna try and brew it harder. The pot is also really, really pretty full, but also the wash was a bit light. I expect the color might be a bit stored a little bit more, so this, well, we'll see, but the aging stage I would identify this cake at could be a little bit more between semi-aged and the fully aged profile. So on the Yangshan, on the first aging stage, on the aged and fully aged, I find cakes I absolutely love. As I'm drinking, at some point I go like, oh wow, this is great. But in the middle, I don't really. I am quite, I'm quite disappointed. And yeah, usually cakes of that age range, which we identify as semi-aged, have quite a lot of harshness, and they neither have the thick and thick, soupy, but with still some bitter power taste of older tea, but also they are not like 100% pure ancient tree. In fact, usually they are not ancient tree at all. They might have some old tree in it when it's lucky, but cakes around that age, particularly 90s up until the mid 2000s, are usually, there's quite a lot of plantation or just a bit of big tree in it. Good. Good, strong aftertaste smelling the cup, but the thing I was most impressed about is how smooth it is. Yes, it was a little bit underbrewed, but there's no harshness whatsoever. Okay, this has been brewing for a bit longer. Yeah, okay, this is a bit more like the color I was thinking about. So actually this cake I would think is much more what I would call aged already, definitely not semi-aged. And it makes sense because I really do like this cake, while there usually is a problem with semi-aged cakes that makes them not that great to drink. Okay, this was perhaps a bit overbrewed, so now there is a little bit of harshness to it. Still, the sweetness, the density, the bitterness are pretty high, so they balance out any sour astringency. That's usually what we identify as harshness. No shame in adding a little bit of water when it's really overbrewed. Good. Yeah, this is very good. This is after I've added some water. It kind of looks like this. Yeah, this is really the color of that I identify as aged. So not semi-aged, not fully aged. Fully aged is darker. Semi-aged is a little bit more redder and lighter. Also some huigan. I kind of feel like going pretty good. Usually huigan in this kind of tea will be more apparent at the end, not in the very first cups, but I can already notice this. There is really something beautiful in tea that's really dark, and yet it makes you feel fresh. It doesn't make you feel heated. Speaking of which, yes, just before I was talking about how I'm going to talk about the evolution of your taste as well. So I think it's the case for a lot of people that they start wanting tea as dark as possible. Particularly if you're really more into the meditation side of it. Usually darker tea makes you feel really calm. It's easier to find drinkable darker tea than yang, because yang Puerh needs to be really high quality to be drinkable, while tea that's really aged, like aging makes everything much more of one thing and much more softer and palatable and drinkable. Excuse me, it's pretty good tea. Burping is a very good sign as well. So I certainly started by drinking a lot of pu'er and a lot of really wet stored shang, and that's everything I drank for like maybe 2-3 years. It took a long time for me to really see why show wasn't quite cutting it in a way that properly aged shang can, and same thing for wet stored shang. And I've seen my preferences in these terms change massively. These days, I cannot I cannot drink anything that will make me feel heated in the mouth, too hot in the body. A part of this is also like Chinese medicine body type. So some people are naturally colder and some people are naturally hotter. So if you're hotter, obviously very hotty it's not gonna go very well with you. And if you're very cold, then very young shampooer might be a bit too harsh on the stomach. In general, it can be harsh on the stomach anyway, but if you're not eaten, for example. But if you're cold, even more. So many other things to say here that, for example, obviously I drink tea based on the weather outside and the time of the day quite a lot. So right now it's October in the UK, it's turned a bit chilly. Now I will drink tea like this. I wouldn't have been drinking tea like this in the middle of the summer. It would have made me too hot. If I drink 2023 pu'er, I'm probably gonna drink it after a quite significant meal. Which usually happens a little bit later in the day, but during a sunny day, there's something that like it flows so much better. So very young tea is much more cooling, so it works so much better. Anyhow, in general, my fear in understanding and what I've seen in Taiwan and from other people drinking tea is that you will tend to prefer drier and drier stored tea, even if you like old tea like this, or if like me, you drink all the way across the spectrum. The drier storage, if you have access to really high quality drier storage, you will tend to prefer that. So, and I think this is quite common, like people start by liking pu'er, and after a while I hear a lot of customers that are like, oh, I'm never gonna touch pu'er at all, it's never good. And, more or less that's true. Although some shows from the 80s can be really, really good. In the last video of the brew pu'er like a pro, I drink a show from the 80s, which is actually a light fermentation show. So light fermentation meaning that it's not gone the full traditional 60 days of wet piling, but only 30. And between that and the aging, that feels more like between a shang and a show. It's really, really lovely how dark and thick it is by being fresh. Let's try this one. Also, I was gonna say a touch overpower, but actually, there is something to it. Even though it's quite strong, bitter, there is something to it. It's my experience a lot that for all good tea, and particularly the aged good tea, you probably want to steep it harder than you think. I keep on being surprised when I accidentally make a too intense cup at how it can really be appreciated as well. Maybe not as I'm used to, but the density balance is still really, really good. So another thing that I mentioned before is this factory taste, and particularly Menghai factory taste. So essentially what happened is that nobody used to care about pu'er. Pu'er was stored more or less pretty wet for a long time, and a lot of it was very ancient trees. So this is up until the 60s, something like that, 70s. And that kind of tea is almost all gone. If it's not gone, it's really, really expensive. So people started drinking the next best thing. The trouble is, though, that from the 70s and particularly the 80s and even more so the 90s, big factory tea is usually very full of plantation tea. what people have found out is that Menghai Tea Factory uses a material from Menghai, which it keeps a very, very good bitterness and strength even after aging. And as a result, Menghai Tea Factory tea are really, really famous and expensive. But yeah, there is a reason. I've tried quite a lot of other cakes that perhaps were made from Yiwu material, and if they're not ultra Yiwu, but just like normal plantation Yiwu, or even outside of banna, they're just a bit too weak. They're not very satisfying. This one feels like it has some really good, some quite powerful material. You can take a look at the cake again. I say that I think is a more 7542 because of the very high concentration of buds and how the small leaves are, although the back is quite different. Well, anyway, I find it quite hard to tell what the origin of a cake is without having any other indications. So I wouldn't be able to say for sure, and actually I would doubt anybody that's able to say for sure on a cake that's been aged so long where the material is. Anyhow, it's got a very good bitterness and strength still, even though it's really dark. And this combined with the good storage makes it a very good cake. So a good news is that when I say I don't particularly like to drink semi-aged tea, because there are more recent 100% gushu tree, 100% pure ancient tree cakes. Well, the price of those are not as crazy as really, really old tea, and it is actually quite feasible to age those by yourself in a Western environment. In general, ancient tree pu'er can be stored in a more drier way. It doesn't need to be stored in a very aggressive way to make it palatable. So for instance, the other day I was trying this tianmenshan from Chen YuanHao, and boy was I blown away. Like the really, really strong bitterness without astringency. It was great. Like that tea will age great. Yeah, it might take 20 years, but actually because it's already so good right now, this kind of tea can be enjoyed even in 5 years. I suppose most Yiwu could actually be enjoyed even younger, but this is so strong. Like in the video, I just go like, wow, I didn't know that Yiwu Manglaria tea could do this. And this is something that we didn't used to have. So all those really expensive ancient tree pu'er cakes from like the 50s and so on, we didn't have this level of purity where a producer would go and get only like really tall ancient trees from a very specific area that have their very specific character. Like this is really, really exciting. We didn't have this, and actually the level of production of gushu has been improved quite a lot. Chen YuanHao is probably the leader, like worldwide leader of making this kind of tea. And their teas from 2003 are like big tree and old tree. They're pretty good. 2007 to 2010, 11, they start to make this 100% pure gushu. But after 12, they even start to make this really good single area teas. Like for example, mansong, yeah, okay, people have always been making mansong, but it was always very limited. But things like their chawangshu and this tianmenshan, these are teas of a quality that's so high that never existed in the past. Like nobody ever made a production of just that. So that's really, really exciting. Those are the kind of tea I want to stock up and age. And then sometimes you still find something pretty good in the 2006, 2012 kind of spectrum that's still gushu. But yeah, one thing that I noticed is that with the more time passing, certainly in the last 10 years, we have teas of production quality that never used to exist before, even in the 10 years earlier. Yeah, so my personal buying strategy and also what I offer to customers is to find as good 100% pure ancient tea as I can for the more recent years, say the last 10, 15 years, something like that. Skip the semi-age area, except the semi-age time, except for some exception, like for example, Hong Kong Gary, because it's been commissioned by Hong Kong Gary to Mengai Tea Factory. It's not as famous. The price is really, really good for what it is. It's very rare though, like, you know, this whole book, I think you might be familiar with that. There's all this, this particular is like 98 to 2003. There's all this like famous factory cakes. A lot of those cost a lot. And in my opinion, in terms of quality, for no particular reason. And that is why we've stopped offering this kind of tea on Puerh UK. We have almost nothing in this range, in the semi-aged. I don't think the value for quality is there at all. I think one is to either find properly more older tea. Yes, sometimes it's really expensive. Sometimes you find something that, for example, this didn't have a wrapper, and because of that it's not famous. And because of that, the price is quite nice. It's probably gonna be less than 1,000 US. Well, we are out of it, but it would be something like that. Something of this quality, if it was famous, it would be easily like 5,000 US, something like that. And sometimes you also find older cakes that happen to be, yeah, very good material, but they're not exactly the thing on the book. And those are great. It's really, really hard because those are great. Those can be great, or they can be really bad. And obviously there's a lot of problems with fakes as well. So older teas are much harder to deal with. And we find that if buying younger tea, there's a few producers, very, very few that can be trusted, and we can test older Gushu tea against them. Well, essentially Chen YuanHao is the one I would trust, and even if I buy some other tea from Puerh UK from other friends, I would try, like, that's my reference point. I think they're the only serious producer that can be trusted in this way completely. For older tea though, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to identify and buy tea and knowing what you're buying. But one thing I found is that by trying a lot of different, supposedly quite anonymous, either special orders, so commissioned by other people to Mengai Tea Factory, Shangwan or whatever, or some less sexy formats, like sometimes you get a tuocha, for example, that's maybe like a tuocha from the 80s. The format is not, people think the quality can be not that good, but actually sometimes the quality can be amazing. And sometimes even like completely naked cake and smaller productions in general. So there's Mengai, Shangwan and Kunming were not the only factories making tea over the 80s and 90s. There were other ones. It's worth trying. I try a lot, and sometimes we find stuff that's really, really good. One of the good things we found was like a Tongsing Hao. I think those might be Yiwu leaves, but they might still be old tree Yiwu leaves. Actually, paradoxically, having a smaller production means that it's more possible that they use old tree leaves because they didn't need so much quantity. But it really needs to be tried. Ooh, when it gets cold, it has this choco bitter flavor. Then I have one last infusion. But yeah, I think that's a pretty, like, when I started buying Puerh, I was like, oh my god, I'm too late. But actually, not at all. There are some teas right now that are really, really exciting. And they are not gonna take 50 years to be even more exciting. Like this kind of tianmenshan tea in 5 years is gonna be great to drink. In 20 years, it's gonna be something that nobody else in the world has made something like this before. Well, Xiao made one a few years ago that was the same quality. Yeah, other cakes we have, like one of the videos I drank, the 2014 Chen YuanHao Yiwu Chawang or Chinese. Also that in 10 years, these are kind of teas that they're so exciting. Like I tried a little bit of Chen YuanHao made some 100% pure ancient tree tea in 2002 and 2003. These are collection cakes. Like I've only tried it a few times. I had one cake myself. Those are great, like stored on hot and dry. It's a taste profile, that's a purity that's not been, it's just, this doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't exist even in very, very old tea because even the quality was not as much. So anyway, those are really rare, but these days, from 2007 more and from 2010, 2012, much more. We have tea that, yeah, you really can age and enjoy something people never had. Well, to me, that's a really, really great news. And in the meanwhile, to satisfy my thirst for this kind of tea, I'm gonna be looking as hard as I can into things that don't have a really, really high price tag, but still deliver value because they're a production too small for people to have noticed and to have at a high market price. All right, let's have this last cup. And the beauty of this is also how you can steep it really, the steeple is incredibly full, but you can steep it more and more. And yeah, it's this beautiful balance between the fact that it's aged enough that it's sweet and soft. Well, it's a combination of aged enough and it was good material to start with, that is sweet and soft, and yet there is not over fermentation. Certainly not in terms of show, but also not in terms of wet storage. So how you feel in the mouth is really clean and fresh. This cup is still vaguely under brewed, but it's very pretty. It's pretty good. The aromas are medium to strong. It's deeply satisfying. This could get better in 5 years or so, but it's really near the point of perfection. One last thing I must add. Yes, it is possible for us to store and make this newer tea progress in ways that are going to be even better than old tea. But one key thing will be to keep the tea hot enough. Having a certain amount of humidity, 65% for example, 69, is not difficult. You can put a buveta pack in your Miller bag, but to also be able to keep the temperature high, 25 degrees would be ideal, 30 would be better. At the same time, it's a little bit more tricky. A certain area of the house should be made for this. You should make sure that the bags are really sealed. Otherwise, if there is heat outside, if there is heating, the humidity will be lower. So if the bag is not properly sealed, it will get into the bag. So it's possible. I'm really excited about it. Those of us in warmer climates, I am even more excited about it. But in general, I am very positive that we're gonna see, and I mean, you could have in your own storage tea that, the sages of the past, they never drank tea of this quality before. I am really, really excited about this.